Good afternoon. Hope you had a nice lunch and also a nice participation. I think we decided to put forward this session in view of the interest that the regulation on late payment proposal has brought to the market of stakeholders and to society. I think in 2009 the Commission put forward a proposal to combat late payments, which then became the Late Payment Directive. I mean, 14 years later, the Commission is presenting this time a new proposal to combat late payments. Essentially, you've seen it already. I think the Late Payment Directive in 2011 has failed to achieve the objectives, certainly achieve some of the objectives, but not necessarily all of them. And then we have also talked about the economic impacts of payment delays. They are all quite evident to all of us: insolvency, bankruptcies, inability to invest, grow, and expand into a new market. And this is now in a context of perma crisis. So we have carried out an impact assessment prior to the regulation, to the proposal for a regulation, as well as largely consult stakeholders. The public consultation to SMEs included in particular an SME panel, and I must say with quite pride that it included participation of almost thousands of SMEs, which took the time. Now that these days they are complaining about the reporting obligations that we impose on SMEs, they took the time to participate in the SME panel. So this is not the only thing that we are doing, and this will be part of this seminar. We'll be talking about the observatory, all the good things that we are also doing, because at the end of the day, it's not by means of a law or a regulation that we are going to change a culture. There are a combination of many different things, and the first thing that we need is good data. I think I have the honor, we have the honor to have here with us, and I would like to thank Rosa Thun for having taken accepted our invitation to be here with us. You know, I think it's not a mystery, she's the rapporteur for the European Parliament for this interesting proposal of the Commission for a regulation on late payment proposal, and I think we are all very keen to hear from her. Then afterwards we'll have a presentation by Antonella Correra. Antonella is my colleague in the unit, the legal officer, policy officer dealing with late payments. She has been following late payments for some years, building up knowledge and data around the experience regarding the Late Payment Directive. I'll give the floor to Rosa. Rosa, it's really an honor to have you here. Welcome, and if we may applaud you. Please come on stage. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for this warm welcome. Thank you for organizing this, dear European Commission. I know it's not only you have an excellent staff. But thank you, Director, very much. I am very happy that I can be here. I'm very happy that I can be in this session. I'm happy because as a member who is responsible for the late payment regulation, that I can listen to you, to your ideas, to your opinions, to your concerns as well. I would like to hear your proposals, all your remarks that deal with this regulation. It's a very valuable and important meeting for me. It's not a very long time ago that I was nominated rapporteur of this regulation. I already have numerous, very variety of meetings behind me with many stakeholders. And it took me the last few weeks to talk to you, to other people. And what is my very strong impression is that it awakes this regulation such strong emotions. Some say that this regulation comes to them as a surprise. So I must admit it's a surprise to me that it comes to someone as a surprise, because we asked the European Commission already in January 2019 to come with a legislative proposal to improve the situation on the market as far as payments are concerned. So to us, this document, this legislation has been awaited for a long time already. And this was not the only time that we asked the Commission to come with a proposal. We called for a legislation on, especially for small and medium enterprises, on various occasions. Now it comes. And it comes as an answer also to the fact that we hear from small and medium enterprises especially, when we ask about challenges, when we ask about problems that they face, then the late payments come usually as the second main problem to them. So I'm very happy that the Commission comes with this proposal. And of course, after listening to SMEs, we continue listening to SMEs, and we will continue the dialogue with the small and medium enterprises, because as you know, for the political group to which I belong, small and medium enterprises are in the focus. This is also the reason why 5 of us, 5 members, participate in this assembly. And this is serious that, that we came. 5 is quite a numerous delegation that we come here to listen to you, to speak, to exchange. But coming back to the proposal. As I said, I met many stakeholders already. And now, depending on the sector, depending on the size, depending on the perspective, on the position in the value chain, they have very different opinions. What is characteristic is that nobody is lukewarm. They either love it or hate it. But the temperature is always the same. And what is also interesting, I hear the praise and criticism, Director, but it's until now to the proposal that you presented. But I don't hear a better proposal. But nobody comes with a better proposal. Between this hatred and love, cold or hot, there is no better proposal than what we received from the European Commission. But we still have this afternoon and tomorrow morning. Maybe something will happen. This proposal of the Commission is bold. It proposes a legal measure that should move the liquidity, that should move the cash flow in the value chain to those who need it, to those who need it most. That means usually smaller companies. They suffer most because of the late payments. But we will still, in the Parliament, we are assessing this proposal. We will continue doing this, and we will ensure that all companies will benefit from it, not only small ones, and that the European economy as a whole will benefit from this decision. And my report on the proposal of the legislation that we received from the Commission, you will see on the 4th of December. This will be my draft report. This we will discuss with shadows. You know how it works, shadow rapporteurs from other political groups. We will discuss with them. We will collect amendments. Surely there will still be time to discuss. You can follow us, either come to the European Parliament, participate, be in the committee. You can follow us online. It will all be completely transparent. And I hope that we will finish working in the European Parliament until February. Well, I can only hope that the Council also, or that it is working already on this regulation, and that there will be also fast progress. Now, we do a lot, we listen, we speak, etc. But what is most important, whatever we will do, it has to be evidence-based. And this evidence we can only gather in cooperating closely with the small and medium enterprises community, and this is why we are here. And I hope that you will participate and be active in the process. Really, as we had many contacts already, we invite you for further ones. And I know that our colleagues from the Commission are also open to meetings and dialogue and conferences, etc. Maybe to finish, those changes, as all changes, demand a certain effort, and human being doesn't like changes very much, and even less the effort. But it is not a revolution what is being proposed. It is not a dramatic change, it's not a drastic change. It aims at an improvement, and we shouldn't be afraid of those changes. We have introduced so many of them already in the European Union on our common market. There is always this first reaction, change. You know, it has always worked like this. Why do you want to change? But either we will better function in 27 altogether and be competitive in the global perspective, or we remain as we are. So this change, I am completely convinced, this change is necessary in our communities. Because finally it's our communities who will benefit from the change if we manage to improve the payment culture. We must ensure that every company has access to a decent cash flow. And only this will guarantee access to better financing opportunities and to innovation and to further investments, but especially for the local businesses. And we need more opportunities in both economic and social dimension. So I really do believe that we will bring it to a successful result, working together, and that this result will be tangible for all of us in a perspective that we cannot define exactly, but a perspective that is on our horizon. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, dear member of the European Parliament. I think also I share the impressions with Bonnie and my colleagues for having touched so important topics. This is either a proposal that either you hate it or love it, because it really goes to the heart of businesses. You also mentioned something very important, that our initiative have to be evidence-based. And this brings me now to speak about why we have set up a European Payment Observatory. I believe that there are some slides. Here we are. You heard this morning that the proposal for the revision of the Late Payment Directive is part of the SME relief package, an important part under the section of access to finance. Why? Because I think for businesses, in order to really have access to finance, it's important that it's paid on time. On-time payments for small businesses is the best, fastest, and best way of accessing finance. And here we are. Why we needed an observatory? Unfortunately, the current directive does not have a requirement to impose another provisions requesting member states or businesses to disclose information about their payment performance or the payment performance of the public authorities. It's only a very vague article, Article 8, on promoting transparency. This is a big handicap indeed. And on this, I think the Parliament in 2019 picked up and identified this as being a key gap in the current directive. And in its resolution of 2019, it emphasized the importance of having regularly collection of data because transparency, and I quote verbatim what the Parliament said, transparency is at the same time discourages late payment, but also is an incentive to build a prompt payment culture. There are some member states that systematically collect the information on payment performance, whether of the public sector or of business to businesses. In some member states, there is a national observatory, and I make the example of France, and we have the opportunity to speak with the National French Observatory. As here today, the representative. Also, this morning you heard that Spain is going to set up its own national payment observatory. More about this later also with the representative of CEPIME. We will know more about this. But I think it was the time for us that we realized that in order to build a prompt payment culture, it is necessary to know what's happening on the ground, have this evidence base that the honorable member was referring to. Because an observatory is much more than a simple data collection, than a simple database of indicators. It is not only a picture, it's a story. It tells how things evolve on the ground. What is the daily story of the companies that suffer late payment? It allows us to see trends, to see how things develop, what is the problem, how it can be solved. Knowing and having information about payment behavior, it allows us to draw conclusions, to anticipate measures, but also to discuss together. And I think with this in mind, this is how we built our observatory. The contract for the observatory was launched at the beginning of this year. It is formally run by our executive agency, EISMEA, and I have Iker Ayerbe here in the audience sitting there representing EISMEA. The contractor is CEPS, and I have Damir, but also representatives from CEPS sitting in the room. And it's the Commission also cooperates closely with both, with CEPS and EISMEA, to implement this project. It is built, as you can see, along three key pillars. There is the typical part of an observatory, so a pure data collection part, so monitoring, building up a database, and Damir from CEPS will later on explain how this database is being built and is being managed. How the data is collected and validated. There is a part on the repository. Here we collect what is being done not only on the pure data, but also the measures, the initiatives that are being taken by public authorities or in the sector, by sectors, by businesses to comply with the obligations of the Late Payment Directive and progressively build a prompt payment culture. And the third part is the communication, the outreach part. So here we have the annual report, of which today I will present a few highlights. The full annual report will be published later in the year, and we will disseminate this information. We have newsletters, and I urge you to subscribe to these newsletters so that you can have on-time information about events, about news, about how in publications that we can put online. We have the annual conference, like we are here today. We have webinars. But behind, I think, I would like perhaps to also mention the heart of the observatory, which is its stakeholder forum. And I would like to take the opportunity to thank the participants to these stakeholder forums, which are public authorities representatives, business organizations, representatives from the banking sectors, from all walks of life, academia, who really enthusiastically contribute to build this observatory. I think we have so far 51 members, but the number is growing, and we're very pleased insist about this because it means that this is something that is slowly but progressively trying to change things and the way we have approached so far the culture of late payment. So I will stop here and I will leave the floor to Damir that will speak about how the database has been built and is being managed. Thank you.
Yes, thank you very much, Antonella. We heard many times today that the need for data is very important for building an observatory on payment and of course to also track in general how payments are performed and what their timeliness is. And so we have set out to build that database. What the overall idea was that we construct a database from data that is already publicly available. We are very much aware that there's many companies, that there's many associations, that there's many public authorities who already produce very nice reports with very deep and detailed data that can be leveraged. And our idea is, well, let's bring this all together into one place from all the single countries that we have, from all the multi-country cross-EU surveys and data sources that we have, and let's bring it all together in one place so we can have a comprehensive and holistic view on basically how payment performance differs across EU states and how it is within the countries. So this was the core basically that we did. How we set out to this is we basically looked far and wide to every possible organization, to every business association, to every chamber of commerce, to every central bank, to every national statistical institute, and broadly just investigated whether there was some data there. This resulted in overall us looking at over 100 sources just to check, okay, if there is data on payment, is there also data on late payment in any of these databases? Out of these 100 sources, more than 100 sources that we looked at, we ended up with approximately 40 sources that had some degree of data on late payments. Now, this data is often quite heterogeneous in practice. What does that mean in particular is that different data sources collect different aspects on the overall issue of late payments. So some focus more on the payment terms, some focus strictly on the delays, some focus on other things such as opinions on policy, on remedial measures, where we basically in practice found that everyone covers a different aspect of the whole, let's say, cake of delayed payments. So this is what we've been tackling with and trying to come up with a way to have this all in one place where the sources complement each other more than they, let's say, fight against each other. And again, complement the overall picture. What is also important for us when we looked at the sources that we collected is that given that we are supposed to track the payment performance, we need these sources to be reusable. There's also, of course, many studies that are done on late payments, but these are, of course, of a bit of a limited use for us because it's a one-time study that's ad hoc. So in terms of tracking late payments, that's not optimal in many cases. So we put an emphasis on data that is being published fairly regularly that we can also use to track how things change over a year, or also in response to crises, for example. What we then also put emphasis on is to kind of look at this data and try to categorize it into several categories so that basically whenever we have the opportunity or someone looks at the database or we publish the data, that we can have several dedicated sections on whatever we're looking at. Broadly speaking, we have indicators on payment times. These are just the normal days to pay, payment terms, things along these lines. We have also a category on payment performance, which centers broadly on payments on time, payments delayed. Furthermore, we have issues on the drivers of delayed payments. So basically surveys that ask for, okay, why do you pay late? Why have you been paid late? To kind of try also to not just track the payment performance itself and the payment times, but also try to get a hold of the reasons why this might happen. And then finally, we have a fourth set of indicators that speaks more to the overall opinions or recent changes that enterprises face in terms of delayed payments. But also on their opinions on remedial measures, on policy measures. So it's basically an idea of, on the one hand, tracking how the delayed payments itself, how do they progress, but also asking for the reasons why they progress in certain ways, and then also seeing companies' responses to them. In general, how we then maintain this database, we have tracked basically all the publication dates of the data sources that we use usually, and so we're always on the lookout whenever this happens. We're scouring restoring basically to the original source and getting it back. Also, another fairly important thing that emerged during this data collection is that we also need the inputs of several of our stakeholders who do collect this data to enrich basically our own database. So stakeholder input is super important because there's in many cases where stakeholders do have data but don't publish it. And so it's important for us to also converse with them and see how they can provide us data that is valuable for us and where it's like a win-win situation for both of us. And finally, we put emphasis on evaluating data that we already collected. This is partly in the form of this annual report, which, if I can give a shout out, Beatrice has highlights that we have for this annual report printed out in physical form. So after the event, feel free to take one. And again, this is kind of the idea that we come to maintain this database with always current data, so we're always able to track it, but then also try to analyze it. And I think that is my time, and I'll hand back to Antonella.
Thank you very much, Damir. And now I think it's, Damir explained the process, and now so let's see the harvest, the results. So this is what we have, the initial results that we have observed so far from this comprehensive overview of, European overview of existing database. When we move and we refer to the general payment performances, so both payments in business to businesses and government to businesses, we observe that in 2022 there was a slight deterioration of companies reporting having issues of late payment, so having suffered issues of late payment, slight deterioration compared to 2021. But more importantly is when we go into the detail of each individual member states, and that's really when you get a more granular data, and then you see where the problems lie. So, for example, there are strong national differences. In Poland, the companies reporting having issues of late payment is 65%, whereas on the other side of the spectrum, we have Sweden or Netherlands, 32% for Sweden and 25% for the Netherlands. We also observed that last year there was a strong deterioration of the situation for businesses in Slovakia and in Slovenia, plus 9%, followed by Italy and Hungary, 6%. Another important aspect is size matters. Payment behavior changes according to the size of the companies. The larger the size of the debtor, the worse it's the payment behavior. So when we look then again at the granularity at the level of member states, we see that on-time payments very much difference in between big companies and micro companies within even one single member state. In France, we have the percentage of micro companies paying on time is 58%, whereas the percentage of big companies paying on time is 18%. In Spain, the micros paying on time is 53%. The big companies is 13%. In Poland, 82% of micros pay on time. The big companies is 46%. In Belgium, the micro paying on time is 45%, big 19%. In Italy, you have the proportion is 40% to 4%. When we go, there is also a difference with sectors. Average payment periods in days. The worst performers are energy and utilities. Average payment periods is 62 days, followed by transports and logistics, 58 days. And on this, I think it, unsurprisingly, I think it's in 2021, in Spain, it was adopted a specific sanctioning regime, particularly against the transport sector, the road transport sector. I would like to focus on two sectors, construction and retail, since we have representative of these two sectors in the room today with whom we are going to have the debate later on. The percentage of average payment periods is 57 days and retail is 44 days. But again, when you go into the detail of the member states, this is where you get the story, when the story gets really interesting. And this is why it's important to have an observatory and understand how things operate in the member states. So for the retail sector, best performers, Netherlands, Luxembourg, and Spain. I would like just to open a parenthesis for the Netherlands, and it's not surprising because in the Netherlands there has been for many years initiatives like Betaal Me Nu, Pay Me Now, which was extremely very much followed also by the government, which was at the same time both encouraging businesses to pay on time in 30 days, but at the same time also creating a partnership between main purchasers and their suppliers in the supply chain, followed by legislative reforms that brought the payment term to 60 and then to 30 days. A little bit disappointing, I have to say, the performance of Spain, considering that in Spain the transposition of the Late Payment Directive foresees maximum payment terms of 60 days, and there is a special legislation on the retail sector. Worst performers, Denmark, 87% of late payments in the wholesale sector. Construction, best performers, Hungary, 80%, and France, 62%. Again, when you look at the measures, then you understand why. In Hungary, in the construction sector, there is a certificate expert body who operates like a kind of mediators to reduce complaints concerning payment disputes in the construction sector. And this has been very successful. In France, you have the activity of the GCSRF, plus in France, you have also direct payment in public contracts, direct payment to subcontractors. So as you can see, these kind of measures bear their fruits. In Poland, worst performance in the construction sector, 73%. When we move to inflation, we see that inflation, yes, has been a problem, but not so much. It was a more problem in the year before, in 2021. And we see that inflation-related payment term extensions were more pronounced in a limited number of countries, in Estonia, in Greece, and in Portugal. Then a big issue is the public sector not setting the right example. Public sector takes longer to pay its invoices compared to private businesses, and the payment gap, so basically the difference between long payments in the public sector and long payments in business to businesses is more pronounced in Lithuania, in Ireland, and in the Netherlands, where it can reach up to 30%. The domino effect. Late payment generates more late payment. It's on average 32% of companies that say, I had to delay my payments to my suppliers because I've not been paid on time. But then again, when you go into the detail of the member states, this becomes even more interesting. The percentage of companies that have answered this kind of effect was 55% in Lithuania, Luxembourg and Finland 40%, and 20% in Denmark. Finally, as Damir said, I think it's important that we need more data if we really want to monitor payment performance. Only a limited number of member states collect systematically data on payment performance. There is even less availability of data at EU level, cross-country levels, and the problem is government to business. That's even more problematic. There is only a limited number of member states that collect data and make it available, publicly available. This is the case of Spain, Italy, and Portugal, but only because the Commission open infringement procedures against these member states. Then we have also, to a certain extent, France, Ireland, and Cyprus. So I will stop here. In the paper that Beatrice from CEPS will distribute, you will have also interesting data about measures, preventive and remedial measures, and I invite you to read these initial results. So this is, for the moment, the highlights, and now we are open for the next session. Thank you.
Very much, Damir and Antonella, for this session. For me, the role is now to introduce the next session, which is a discussion on something that I think we all agree, which is how to foster a culture of prompt payment. We may disagree on different tools, objectives, but at the end of the day, I think we all agree on the prompt payment culture that we all need. So the question is very much how do we foster? And I would like, in that sense, to invite Guillaume Richet From the on stage, please, Guillaume, welcome. From the French Payment Observatory, Lina Whitaker from Eurocommerce, welcome, Lina. Fernando Sixos Jimenez from the European Builders Confederation, and then also Mr. Luis Arevallos from the SEPIME, the Spanish Small and Medium Enterprise Association. So the panel is going to be moderated by my colleague Antonella. So I'm happy, so I will have to also participate in the listening mode. Fantastic. I leave you, I think you have about 20, 25 minutes, so be short and focus. 25.
Okay. Thank you very much, Bonnie. Thank you. I will start with Guillaume. Guillaume, you are the head of unit of enterprises in the Banque de France. Mm-hmm. Banque de France is basically under the auspices of the Banque de France. The French National Observatory publishes its national report. We have to say that the French National Observatory probably is the first one in Europe because you have a long tradition. I think it started in 1999.
1991.
1991 even. Yeah. So it's a long standing tradition. So since you have had this long time, how do you think that the French Observatory has contributed? What has been the contribution of the French Observatory to at the time didn't exist the late payment directive, but at least to improve the payment culture in France, and then when the late payment directive arrives, in the implementation of the late payment directive?
Thank you, Antonella, for this question. Thank you all for inviting me today. It's a real pleasure to be able to discuss about this topic of late payments. Indeed, we started very early in France because for a long time now we have difficulties related to late payments. It improved, and if I can have the slide, I can show you how it improved. So this wonderful graph that you can see without any kind of legend and anything, this is to make sure that you are focused on what I'm saying. Is going to show you why we think it's important to have both regulation and an observatory. In blue, you have basically the account receivable, so client delays, and in green you have the accounts payables, so your providers, what you have to pay. What you can see first is the dashed line on the top. So on the top, it's only micro enterprises. So this is the amount, the share of payments without delays. So for micro enterprises only, it's very high. It's 80%. And for the rest of companies, so without micro enterprises, it's lower. It started very low. It started very low in 2007, and it's getting better up to 2022. One comment is this difference between sizes. So indeed, I agree, size matter. I just want to precise one thing. So when you are micro enterprises, at least in France, your main client are consumers. So you do not have any kind of payment delays regarding to client. I'm French. I love to eat some baguette. I go to the bakery. I pay with my credit card. So there is no delay. So it's easier for the baker to pay on time its provider. And so this is why you have this correlation between the account receivables and the account payables. So this is the second point that you mentioned, the domino effect, of course. And the third point I want to make, so we passed many laws in France, but two main laws related to late payments. In 2008, it was called the Law for Modernization the Economy, and it set a frame in France. It's 60 days after sending the invoice you have to pay your provider. We have many specificities related to the different behaviors that have been mentioned by Bonnie, depending on the business federation and business activities, but roughly it's 60 days. And so when we enforced the law, you can see the improvement on share of payments without delay. Started from 50%, reaching 65%, basically. And then in 2018, we passed a second law. It was called the Law Sapin II, because it was our minister at the time, Monsieur Sapin. And we increased by 5 the amount of fine if you do not respect the this frame of late payment, if you do not respect the law, basically. So we went up to 2 million euros if you are not complying with the law, and it goes up to 4 million if we already find you, and it's mean the DGCCRF, it's not the Banque de France, of course. We are an independent institution, we are the central bank only. So 2 million if you do not respect the law, 4 million if you have already been fined because you didn't respect the law, and you are not complying again. And you can see 2019, 2021, it's starting to increase again. So basically, I just want to make 2 points. The first one is we are firm believer in the efficiency in the regulation. The regulation is there to set a frame within companies can contract freely. So we have to negotiate the size of the frame, but still we need a frame. This is the first point. And the second point is that behavior are key in terms of late payment. There is the contract, but this is the way you are acting between companies, between a client and a provider, and you want more and more integration. We want it in France, but we want it as well within the European Union. And this is why an observatory is very important, to put around the same table people, companies that might not have the same ability to pay, the same behavior in terms of payments, especially at the European level, with different kind of behavior across countries, but it's still very important.
Thank you very much, Guillaume. So then what would be your recommendation for this European Observatory? What would be your...
My main recommendation for the observatory is set up a full body observatory empowered by the regulation and having the ability to cover the whole regulation. It's an observatory, it's not the regulative body, but it's there to elaborate, to discuss, to influence the regulation, the regulator, but a full body one for the whole regulation.
Thank you very much, Guillaume, for this intervention. Lina, you are Director of Competitiveness in Eurocommerce. To you the question, what is your impression of your take on the regulation also, and also a few comments on these high initial results that we have just heard now?
Thank you. And so Eurocommerce, for those who aren't familiar with us, we are representing retail and wholesale, so the EU umbrella association. So our membership is actually composed of the large companies, but also national associations. So there we are also talking about 1 in 4 of all EU SMEs, which are operating in retail and wholesale. So it's very tricky to fit everything in 5 minutes, but I just wanted to react a little bit with the introduction, that this is new regulation has brought out a feeling of love and hate. And maybe part of that, and the reason why the solutions aren't coming free-flowing in such a short period of time since seeing the preferred option, is that it's super complicated when you start to take different views. Even within our own membership, perhaps we're a bit easy because we have a unified voice, also for wholesale, which is also the creditor. But I think we also saw from the feedback that the Commission has received that it's not just retail and wholesale that's saying, it doesn't seem to point in this right direction. There's trade credit finance, there's SME representatives. And so I think it's a little bit difficult to say it should be love-hate. I think maybe, as the report also shows, is it doesn't all point in the right direction, in the same direction. It doesn't all point to limiting payment terms down to 30 days. And one of the things that I think is also important is that this data from the report is coming. It's coming at the end of the year. I hear the report of Ms. Tunn is out in 4th of December with deadlines for amendments on the 12th of December. I worry that we are going so fast that we're not even going to have the time to properly look at this. And this perhaps is an opportunity to have a look at the background that this slide also shows, is because this is quite a dramatic situation that is faced, and with the idea that we now bring everybody to operating within their means. This shows that actually the amount of money that's going to be available to plug the gap that we calculate for retail and wholesale alone, 150 billion, to move from the average payment term, which you've seen is 44 days, which actually under the regulation is fine as that. And I know that there are longer payment terms, but the reason also for this is the way that the business model is developed. You aren't getting all of your money back in one go. It is a chance of you have no contract with the consumer, and that is what's changing the way that payment terms are being negotiated. And now the regulation comes with zero flexibility. I hear it says this, of course, you can go below 30 days, but that's not real negotiation. The negotiation is happening also to give mutual benefits. And there's many examples. If you walk down one of the nice streets in Bilbao, you can see all these shops. And if you start thinking about how often is it that they're actually going to be selling all the clothes in their shop, how often are they actually going to be selling perhaps the more expensive items? And that's where the unintended consequence, the dramatic change, okay, of course we don't want change and nobody really likes it, but if the effect could be that it will reduce the choice that is actually available for SMEs, it might reduce the ability for them to offer affordable prices, the consequences that we see at Eurocommerce is that it can strengthen the position of non-EU operators. People constantly turn to their phone. And we know that different types of non-EU online intermediation platforms, they have no inventory. The new proposal does basically discourage holding stock inventory. We've learned from the crisis that you need to have this in your stock rooms to manage peaks and troughs in supply and demand. It's part of our resilience. And it also will have a big effect, we see, for SMEs. And I think what's important to realize is that these SMEs are across the EU. It won't enable them to have the choice that they want, to put on the shelves for those consumers. They have perhaps less people coming through the door. And if you don't give people the time to negotiate and have the time to sell back, then this also reduces their attractivity, their competitiveness, their ability to also expand. Where there's also another view that what the regulation will do as a consequence is does it make it more difficult to even start that business in the first place? You have a shop. Are you only going to stock the inventory that you're going to be able to sell in 1 month to pay back your suppliers? Or is there another question of, or is there another question also of how do I branch out? How do I find an alternative in terms of new line of business? But if the risk of that going wrong for the fact that you won't be able to pay back your suppliers, then why would you start in the first place? So these are many of the consequences that we see flowing, also from the fact that this will be a dramatic change. And we just would like to also see some taking of a bit of time here, that this perhaps can also be a look at it, maybe that the preferred option was tested. And you look at the feedback and you say, well, actually, does it really land right? Because the consequences that we really see is that it could have this effect on resilience. It could have effect on choice. Larger will be included, but that will be felt in the pockets. At one point when you have low margins that are squeezed and they cannot sustainably keep the cost of more expensive finance away from the consumer, this will have that effect too. And it strengthens a lot of non-EU suppliers, online intermediation. And I think we all deserve to just take stock and say, is this definitely going in the right direction? Is this fallout with this slide, as it shows, could be the consequences which will be felt across the EU? Is this the right direction? And I think it's a good way to take stock, look at the observatories, look at the new observatory that's starting in Spain, and have that good conversation about how we get the right landing position.
Thank you very much, Lina. What would be then your proposal then, from your point of view?
I think we need more time. It would be fair to say that we've always stood behind freedom of contract. This flexibility needs to be there. I know that the Commission's assessment says, okay, grossly unfair doesn't work, but there has to be some freedom of contract. And I mean, the example of the wholesalers also give this, because they are trying to work in a situation where their value proposition is disappearing. They've been offering supplier credit, and this is not able to be, they've been delaying the invoice when they find out that they might not be able to finish their project at this time. So it does work both ways. Similarly, I think even you can take that the payment terms have been extended in inflation. That's also where there could be a renegotiation of yours to say, I heard at the Parliament where there was an entrepreneur who came forward and said, well, look, I can't negotiate with the taxman, but I can negotiate with my suppliers if I have a bad month or I just need that little bit more time. And That's gone. As far as I can see, there is no room now for any freedom of contract, any negotiation. And I think this will leave big gaps.
Thank you. And now from retail and wholesale to construction, we have Fernando Cisco Jimenez. You are the Secretary General of the European Builders Confederation, representing SMEs in the construction sector. The same question as Lina. What is your take about the new regulation? How, from the point of view of the construction sector, what is that you're needed, and how can we improve and build a better payment culture in the construction sector?
For us, the take is quite different, because I'm also going to tell you a story of how is the life of a construction SME today, so that you understand why we are so supportive of the proposal from the Commission. Today, and to emphasize this, EBC represents exclusively micro, small contractors or companies in construction. So we are really focusing on the micro, small range in construction. And this is important to say, because as you will see in the slide, you might have heard that construction is 99.9% of small companies, but the reality is, and it's not our figures, this is official statistics, 95% of companies in construction are micro. A second point I would like to emphasize is that you were talking about the domino effect. In construction, you have the possibility, it's the usual scenario, to have a main contractor that then distributes work with subcontractors who are enabled to also subcontract themselves. So you create a long chain that we call the construction value chain, sometimes we call the chain of debt. We have disputes over the quality of goods and services because of the goods or services we have in construction, and then as well public procurement is one important source of income. Today the situation of a construction SME is that you are asked to contribute to the digitalization and the carbonization efforts of the European building stock, because we have one goal, is to have a continent in Europe that is decarbonized. Sustainability and digitalization require investment. So you need those small companies to have an investment capacity that is, and this is where late payment comes, suffocated by late payment, because in reality, we have many situations where we cannot invest and hire new people or invest in new technology, or the members of our members don't even envisage, because the cash flow is too little to think about that. And of course, this is no news. All the situations we have felt over the recent years have acted as a fertilizer of late payment, because the situation, economic situations was very difficult. And that's why in our sector, because we have very small companies as the overwhelming majority, that we call for a very simple rule, and we have been calling for this since the last directive, if I may say so, because we consider that the bargaining power we have in order to improve the situation in our sector is not there. The situation is that we're talking about a large company and a small company, or a public authority and a small company. You have a lack of bargaining power. I mean, the very first message that construction companies are bringing to us is, why do you want us to voice our concerns if we're going to lose our clients or our partners? This is the reality we have. And this is why we are so supportive of the rule. Maybe we can go to the next slide, is because we ask our members to depict what is the reality of late payment in construction. And actually, and this is something we share publicly, you can have a look, we have been told so many stories of tricks or situations where there is an abuse that is actually so easy to put in place, because the current legislation, the current framework allows for many loopholes. And this is why, and sorry again for the reference maybe to the Lord of the Rings, one simple rule to rule them all would be something that would provide a framework, indeed, that is very easy for worst case scenarios. Next slide, please, if it's possible. Because we consider that One of the we consider that if we don't make the framework as simple and as coherent as possible, we might end up with several exceptions, even including our sector, but that because the framework will be made of exceptions, we will actually create another framework with a lot of loopholes. So to create something that is simple and that could potentially smoothen the enforcement, this is where the way we propose to go, because yes, enforcement is something that was already missing with the current framework and the directive, because let's not fool ourselves. One thing is to have a regulatory framework, another thing is to have people paying. And here we consider that it would facilitate setting up a system to enforce if the rule is very simple and we don't have to go to many separate under subgroups that are in that same framework.
Thank you very much, Fernando. So clear rules, clear framework, clear enforcement. And because there is really not real negotiations between a big and a small.
Indeed.
And this is why we need this kind of solutions. And now in order, last but not least, we started with an observatory, we end with another observatory. I have Luisa Reballos from CEPIME. CEPIME has run for a long time an own observatory in Spain, probably has been the only observatory so far before now the starting of the national observatory in Spain. Again, Luis, first your view on the regulation, and then I would appreciate the role of CEPIME and how it's going to set up the National Payment Observatory in Spain. Thank you.
Okay, Antonella, thanks a lot. Many things to say in that time.
In a few minutes,
I'll try.
yes.
First of all, I've spoken this morning about best regulation, about SMEC. Some of you, I saw you then, but I play at home in Spain. I'm the Spanish medium enterprise, so welcome to Spain to all of you. I hope you enjoy Bilbao. And I'm going to start in the same way that I speak this morning, and I'm going to congratulate you. And this morning I spoke about the impossible infrastructure of social dialogue. So, and it's so important. We are here, many of you are part of them, part of Business Europe, SM United, different sectors, and it's something that is very, very important in this issue, because it's not easy, it's not black and white, and I think all the people who were speaking in the corridors or whatever, and the rest, we have to put our minds very open to resolve that. So it's very important. In our case, CEPIME, we are 3,000 net association inside, in different sectors, in different territorial, of course, construction, retail, and whatever. And it's for me, in my opinion, it's very important for a good rules in Europe. CEPIME, the analysis of late payment. We start. I saw many members of the government, of the Ministry of Industry. We started 10 years ago with a cooperation with the minister. I'm going to read exactly. July 2014, the late payment was published, thanks to the collaboration, and it's a new instrument for the follow-up and monitoring of the late payments of commercial transactions between companies and the public administration, with quarterly information on the evolution of the delays and no payment by companies. Okay, 10 years later, we continue with that. We participate in the report of the Commission. And the key here is the quality of the data. It's something we speak with different ministries of the government here in Spain. Maybe electronic invoice will help. We are working on that in Spain. It's something maybe we can help. With best data, we have best decision. In our case, we work with companies of the government. It's a good work, but of course we need more to have more, can do better decision. Nowadays we continue. And to Rose, from CEPIME, we'll welcome the proposal of the new regulation. We are the part, we love it. Okay, we now will see the details, but at the first sight is love, no? So now here, okay, we have to we try to say to the government it's so important to be a priority for the presidency of the Spanish president, and we hope we continue. We see how it works, but definitely congrats about that. About the late payment conservatory, you see, okay, it's very short, the time is quick. Okay, we'll see how we have room to improve, no? But you can see how it improved, no, with the regulation. It's something, okay, we passed in 12, and now I have to improve, because now the last quarter we have in the observatory is 81 days in Spain in general, no? So we have plenty of room to improve, no? But I think it's very important to see the difference. In the next slide, please, if it's possible, this is important because it's the cost of the late payment, and this part is the rates, no? And we can see now, 10 years ago, more than 10 years ago, the cost is very similar from now. So, okay, we improve, but the cost now with the rates is something we have to know, no? That's now is 1,200 million, especially only for a small and medium enterprise, must be. Please, if it's possible, the last one. Okay, another way is the financial issue. Okay, we know here the bank loans for SMEs now is so difficult. So it's another variable we have to know, no? Okay, the cost and the difficult to finance for a small and medium enterprise. So, the time is go. But for the proposal, what we say, okay, we love, in our opinion, one of the main problem is who introduce in the economy. In Spain, I speak about Spain, it's a huge amount of money in the air. And if we say tomorrow, we are going to start tomorrow 30 days, the problem is not going to be for the biggest company. The problem is going to be for the smaller one. So we propose is not how to introduce that, beginning for the administration, starting the money going down to the biggest one, take money, and then to the medium, and finally to the smaller companies, because they are the less money, they have time to produce products, service, they have a time, and it's so difficult for them to do that. If we don't do that, the problem is with the small and medium enterprise. I don't want to spend more time.
Thank you very much, Luis. It has been a real pleasure, these interventions and all the intervention of the speakers. I think I'd like to take a few minutes and offer now the floor to the audience in case there are questions. I also like to remind that this session is being broadcast in video, so we can also take questions from the audience that is following us online. So the floor is yours. And it's yours. If you can please state your name and before state your name and the organization you represent.
Jacinto from PIMEC. We basically welcome the proposal from the European Commission, so we congratulate you on this, and we mostly agree with CEPIME, with our colleagues from CEPIME on this proposal. But I have a question related to the issue, which is a key issue of enforcement. And this is one of the main topics in your proposal for regulation. Do we expect the Commission to be more active in the monitoring and enforcement of this? I mean, there are a number of infringement cases against member states. Do you expect to monitor this in a more systematic way through the European semester, for example? What is your position in this? Thank you.
Under the current directive, we indeed have opened a number of infringement procedures which have escalated. So I think we have like 8 or 9 member states under infringement. We follow systematically the issue of late payments also under the semester. For some member states, we have put compliance with the late payment directive in the national resiliency and recovery plans. An example is Spain. Another example is Italy, for example. So, but this is, it is very difficult for us to carry out these activities without regular access to data. So this is why also the idea of having an observatory is very useful for us to carry out what is our duty. We are the guardians of the treaty and guardians also of the legislation that is implemented, which is the implementation of the treaty. But at the same time, we also need to have better enforcement and support with the member states on the ground. Because whereas on late payments from the public sector, we can obtain infringements, it's much more difficult when it comes to businesses and has been more difficult. So having an enforcement arm under the regulation, hence the provisions on enforcement in the regulation, will help make the enforcement in general of the rules more effective. I think the next question is the gentleman here.
David Caro, European Small Business Alliance. But I will also speak that I have my own business, so I see this from, as we say in the UK, the coalface. Listening to what's been said today, I think a combination of what the French authorities have put in place and what the construction industry have suggested form the basis of a very good way forward. And I think it would be worth paying much attention to what they've said today and carrying that into potential legislation that we may have at EU level. There are a couple of areas, though. One of them you touched on in the construction industry is this discounting, enforced discounting. And I think that it's very important that the Commission looks at potential ways that large companies have of circumventing any legislation that we put in place. And it must be an ongoing process and learning from the devious methods that many large companies might put in place and following that through with counter legislation to cut that out. Because there is a lot of this forced discounting. We'll pay you in your 30 days, but you're going to have to give us a 10% discount, which is as bad as waiting for the payment for another 30 days. And I think we must be aware of that circumventing. As always, it's very difficult for small businesses to report against their potentially major client that there is a late payment issue. Now, again, it's all very well saying that we can make this compulsory, mandatory, that interest must be paid if there's a late payment. The penalties that you call, and I think the penalties, you're quite right, need to be extremely high to make a real deterrent. But I think that that reporting, the mandatory aspect, is how do you know? How do you know that that mandatory aspect has been followed through? If the small company doesn't report it, and the large company certainly isn't going to hold its own hand up and say, we've been a good boy and we paid this, I think then you must look at legislation that empowers or requires auditing companies to report when a company has not followed the rules. This removes the obligation from the small company to report bad payment, and the auditors of that large company have an obligation to to report that company is not following the regulations. So I think there needs to be this backup that shows that this is being followed through. And I would just a quick comment on Lena. Lena and I know each other quite well. And I, in some ways, I sympathise for Lena because she's between a rock and a hard place in that she's representing large companies and small companies. So it's very difficult to have that middle line. But it also shows the difficulty of different sectors and the requirements that are required within different sectors. So I think that needs to be paid attention to too. And just a final comment that many of the small businesses, mine included, I'm in the automotive supply chain, we aren't given contracts. We're never given contracts because the large companies want to be able to walk away at any time. And that means that there is less enforceable regulation for those companies to stick to. All we have is open orders to supply as long as they want us to supply, and then they can walk away. And just as an aside to that, which is slightly moving away and something for the Commission to understand, if you don't have a contract and you want to go to a bank to get a loan for a new equipment, where's your contract? We haven't got a contract. Oh, sorry, we can't give you a loan on that basis because we've got no proof you can pay that loan back. So this contract knock-on is also an issue in other areas as well as late payments. And I think I've said enough there.
Thank you very much. I think Guillaume would like to comment back on this.
Yeah, I just want to provide some insight on what you just said, and basically 2 points. The one referring to fine and penalties. We fully agree. One problem, for instance, with the French law is that the penalties are not enforced. Nobody asks for the penalties that are in the law. And so this is why we need this regulative body that comes afterwards. It's the government, and says it's the DGCCRF to say, look, you didn't have a proper behavior, you had this contract, you didn't comply with the law, you have to pay the fine now, no more the penalty. But there is a technical point. The fine is a flat fee. And we need to move to a percentage point, basically. Big companies, when you look at 2 million, they don't care. So it doesn't show on the balance sheet, so they don't care. And it comes to my second point, when you spoke about audit companies, it's the one thing we try to work on at the French Observatory, is that audit companies in France, they have to report bad behavior in terms of late payments. But again, for big companies, 2 million doesn't show on the accounts. So the audit companies, they don't have anything to report because they don't have the data, because it's too low, the level to report bad behaviors. So we are trying currently to improve that thing with the Business Federation of Accounting and Auditing, but it's not that easy. But those are 2 valid points.
Just one other point, if I can make. Sorry about that. If late payment causes a small company to go into bankruptcy, I think there should also be a measure. Fines, we all know, are never seen. They go into government coffers for the government use. I think there should also be a form of compensation. If a company goes into bankruptcy, then compensation should be paid into the estate of that company to go to the other companies that have suffered from that bankruptcy as well. I think it's very important that if a company is forced into bankruptcy because of late payment, then other companies suffer, and I think there must be a way of compensating those companies as well.
Thank you very much. No, but you also raised an issue on enforcement, and on this I also have a question in the chat, is how do we ensure robust and uniform enforcement across the EU? You also had a question, is difficult for a company to report on it, probably its main supplier, its main customer, its main client. I think this is why in the draft proposals we also put the possibility for companies to present complaints to these enforcement bodies, confidential, that has to be treated confidentially. Uniform enforcement across the EU, this is why we have a regulation. So in the draft proposal, we have identified specific tasks that these enforcement bodies have to put in place, so some standard obligations or duties and tasks that they have to put in place in order to ensure that all these enforcement bodies can do their task in a similar way. On the issue of discounting, if you take a look at the impact assessment of the Commission, in one of the annexes there is a list of unfair practices, and the discounting is, they have a name, it's called early bird practices, early bird discounting. What we have found out in our experience of the directive is that the creativity of the bad debtor has no limit. So really it's something that we have to be aware of. So, I don't know, are there other questions? Yes, please. Mike.
Hi, it's Michele Antonioli from BFF Banking Group.
Sorry if I interrupt you. I have to say goodbye to Guillaume, who has to catch a plane. So thank you very much for your presence.
Not being late this time.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
So being a bank, I represent a bit the point of view of the banking system, and the question is related to what was mentioned in the introduction of the directive and then later on, that with this directive we are trying to inject cash inside the system and draw it down to the smaller players that are the SME. And the point that I have here is from the experience that we have, there are in the various markets of Europe practices that are national law or contractual mechanism where it's forbidden to finance, ourselves, let's say the company, to finance themselves through the usage of the invoice, because there is the bind of assignment on some side, or that can be contractually or legally, no? And this is clearly not in line with the principle of the directive or the revision of the regulation you are saying. So the question here is if this could be the case in order to remove this kind of provision that are done or contractually with bilateral negotiation, either in the national law in some countries that are prohibiting the usage of factoring tool or financing tools using the invoice, no? Because we know that the invoice can be a source of financing that can be very valuable for SME, but for all the companies in general. So I think there is this occasion in this in the new regulation. Thank you.
Yes, as the European Commission, we are aware of this practice of ban on assignments, and this is, again, it's one of the unfair practices that we have identified and listed in our impact assessment. And on this, already back in 2019, the European Parliament was very vocal about the issue of ban on assignments, especially when there are laws, hard law in some member states that the public sector can really. The example of Italy we know very well, when the public authorities say they have the right to without any explanation. I mean, you ask for assignment of the credit, they said the public authority has to give an authorization, and the silence is already denial of this authorization, so they don't even explain why. So yes, we are aware of this is an issue, considering also that in France the factoring for SMEs is working right well. There is a very well-tailored offer of factoring services, especially for SMEs. So yeah, thank you for this contribution. Luis.
No, I think it's important. It's something that we speak inside the CEPIME Observatory, because in Spain, confirming is very useful. Okay, the first problem of late payment for a small company is to be paid, the most important. So many companies, specific in some sectors, say, okay, for me important is to be paid. The next is, okay, the days, no? But the confirming is good. The problem the confirming, and we speak with the financial sector, is the cost, okay? Because the debt put the price of the debt. That is absolutely crazy. Okay, you want the money, you pay maybe at 8% or 7%, okay? Imagine the confirming haven't got any cost. For me, SME, it's perfect. So maybe you can find something about that. It's not easy, but it's because I was saying we have to find our minds open, no? To find some kinds of things, because in some sector it's very important, and the most important, I repeat, is to be paid. No?
Indeed, there is a slight difference, because confirming is what we call reverse supply, whereas what they say is the factoring thing. But again, yes, the important is that the cost for the creditor should be a reasonable cost. I mean, there is what I was making the example in France. There are some companies that I want to be paid real time. I have the invoice, I issued my invoice, I want to be paid now, I don't want to wait a day. And I know that this, again, the factoring services in France is in 24 hours you have the money. There is a little cost, but the creditor is willing to pay this cost. The confirming in Spain it's a little bit more different, because especially there, then you have, the creditor has to pay a huge cost to access the money. And the problem is that for the debtor, on its books, it appears has already been paid the moment they gave the instruction to the bank. So it's not detected anymore as a late payment.
That data.
So I think we have to cut. This is the instruction I'm getting.
That was very clear.
It was very clear. So I'd like to thank all the distinguished speakers, the honorable member of the European Parliament, and all the present here today for this very interesting debate. Thank you very much.